Does writing with ADHD feel like pure chaos? If so, you are in for a real treat today because Nicole Bross and I are breaking down the brain-friendly shifts that will help you finally finish your draft. Hello and welcome to the Speculative Fiction Writing Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Heather Davis. I'm a book coach, developmental editor, and fellow storyteller. And this is the show that's all about how to brainstorm, write, edit, publish, and sell a powerful speculative fiction novel, and maybe just change the world too. And today I would like to welcome the brilliant Nicole Bross. Nicole is a book coach and the author of a brand new Amazon best-selling book titled A Novel Approach: Strategies for ADHD Writers. She is an advocate for mental health awareness, having lived since childhood with panic disorder and anxiety. A more recent diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has unlocked additional insight into some of the roadblocks she faces in her daily life. Above all, she believes openness and honesty about mental health and illness is critical to fighting stigma, and she considers herself proudly neurodiverse. Nicole, thank you so much for being on the show. I am super excited to chat with you today about your new book and about your insights into writing with ADHD.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure to have you. When I saw your book come out, I was like, I immediately knew that I had to have you on. I mean, I am a writer with ADHD, so I definitely wish that I had had your book many, many years ago when I first, started out my journey and was thinking, why am I not like other writers? What's wrong with me? So we'll get into that. But yeah, so I loved your book.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh,
There's
you're
so
very
many of
welcome.
us out there, aren't there?
It's so funny because I remember even when I first found out as an adult that I had ADHD, I just remember thinking, oh, I guess I'm all alone. I'm like the only person I know with this. And then we started coming out of the woodwork. And no, a lot of writers have it. A lot of people have it. Anyway, before we dive into talking specifically about your book and about ADHD in general, I would love to get to know you a little bit more as a writer and introduce you to the listeners so they can know more about you. So first, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your background as a writer. So what do you write and when did you start, and kind of tell us about yourself?
I was one of those kids who was told from a very young age, you should be a writer. I was writing short stories and like mysteries in grade school, doing silly things like publishing a family neighborhood newsletter when I was like 8 years old and walking around selling them door to door for a quarter and, funding my candy addiction that way. And then, I did journalism in high school. So I did the newspaper. My degree is in journalism as well. So I've done freelance nonfiction writing. But I've also always been drawn to fiction. And that I did NaNoWriMo for the first time in 2011, I think, when I had like two toddlers and a job and all. Yeah, it was bonkers. I don't know how I did it.
Brave
And
woman.
then yeah, from that point, I decided like I can do this. I can make time for this in my life. I had to completely cut TV out of my life in order to make it work, but that's all right. And my first fiction book was published in 2019.
Oh, nice. And what genre do you write in fiction?
So that book was an adult supernatural mystery, and I've since shifted over to YA. So the stuff that I'm working on right now is like YA kind of dark fantasy slash horror. I like to like take normal situations and then make them spooky is kind of how I describe my writing idea generation process.
I love that. So that means that the folks who are listening to this podcast, since it's all about speculative fiction, that means you guys would probably love her books. So definitely go check those out, even beyond her ADHD book. So that sounds like quite fun. I love that. So what is your writing practice like? So you have ADHD. Do you write for a certain amount of time every day? Do you write to a word count? Is there some other thing that you personally use?
I'm not an everyday writer. It doesn't work with my kind of thought process. So I do try and block out specific times in my calendar that's like protected writing time. Right now it's Friday afternoons. So at least once a week, I make sure that I have some time. And I like to track a lot of different metrics and statistics when I write. So I'll track things like where I am, what time of day is it, and then things like, how long did it take me to write? How many words did I write that day? And I try and kind of figure out what the ideal scenario is, or what the better than not scenarios are, I guess, for writing. So I know that I'm not very effective early in the morning before my ADHD meds kick in. My thoughts are just not kind of put together. It used to be that later in the evening was the best time for me, but I found, as I'm getting a little bit older, that doesn't work so well. Like I'm kind of mentally exhausted, especially since I'm working pretty close to full time at this point on book coaching and editing. So afternoons tend to be a better time for me. And outside of the house is better than in the house. But that's
Mhm.
because I don't have an office in my house. So if I'm working inside, it's at the kitchen table, which is, the hub of the house. I have a shed in my backyard, which is what I'm sitting in right now, which is kind of my spring, summer, fall office. But cold Canadian winters are not really conducive to that. It's not insulated. It's just like a prefab vinyl shed. So yeah, I'm just trying to maximize the time that I have to be the most effective.
I love the what you said about kind of reevaluating what's the best writing routine for you. I know that in when I work with clients, that's something we talk about, like right at the beginning, trying to get away from the mindset that so many folks have of like making themselves feel bad and like doing a particular routine that they might not have reevaluated in years and years. Because I too am like you. I used to work better in the mornings, and now I found that I need like to be out in nature for a while first, and then I can come right. But I have to do it before I work on anyone else's because I'm obviously, guys, I'm also a book coach. So I have to do it before I work on other people's work, or that will totally discombobulate me and I won't be able to do my own. So that periodic reevaluation of what works for me as a writer is so important.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. I really like that idea of going out into nature, especially for those of us that work from home. There can be, a lot of blurring between home space and workspace. So, if you consider it like walking to work, going for a quick walk around the neighborhood, and then you show up back at home again, but now you're in work focus mode, that can really help to kind of shift perspective.
Oh, that's so funny, Nicole. I had never thought of it like that before, but I will never think of it any other way again. Like, I'm walking to work, guys. This is great. I love that. Okay, so you, of course, are a book coach. Do you preferentially work with folks who have ADHD, or do you just work with all kinds of people?
I'm happy to work with all kinds of people, and I never ask anyone to disclose any type of diagnosis or anything like that. So it's not a prerequisite at all. I don't have a like no neurotypicals banner on my website or anything. I do find that the tools and the resources that I've developed for my own kind of writing practice can be very helpful for neurodiverse folks. So, I certainly put out there that, I'm open to that and I feel that I can really help those types of people. But really, like the only kind of gate, I guess, is that I only work with fiction. So, yeah,
Nice.
no nonfiction unless it's like line edits. I'll do line edits happily on nonfiction. Otherwise, yeah.
Nice, nice, nice. And so you wrote your book, Writing with ADHD, Strategies for ADHD, or I'm sorry, a novel approach strategies for ADHD writers. What made you, why that book? Like, what made you think this book has to exist and I'm going to be the one to write it?
It's actually an interesting question because it wasn't my idea in the first place. I have a co-author. Her name is Kirsten Donahue, and she had actually come to me with the idea of writing the book. She had read some articles that I had written, like guest posts and stuff like that, about being a writer with ADHD, what it was like discovering that kind of later in life, in the middle of my writing career. Kind of after I'd written my first published fiction book, but before it had come out, was kind of when I was figuring all that out. And she is like an ADHD life coach, and she had this idea to write this book. And so she'd read my experiences and thought, hey, we would be a good fit for each other. So we actually didn't know each other at all before this came about. But as soon as she said the idea, I was like, oh my God, yes, like the world, and I did some research. I'm like, this book doesn't exist. So from that point on, we were often running as much as two writers with ADHD who live on different continents 9 hours apart can be.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So, and what a complementary skill set you guys have, right? I mean, she's a life coach who specializes in that, and you're a book coach who has that experience. How was it writing with another person on a topic that's so personal like this? Did it work really well? Were there any parts that were
I've
challenging?
Yeah, I've never co-written with anybody before, and I'm normally a very kind of insulated writer. Like I don't let people see my writing until it's been through at least a few rounds of revision. And so having us both kind of working in this common Google Doc, at the same time, and she's like reading all my messy, half-formed thoughts and everything. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, I guess. I introduced her to the wonders of outlining because she had never really worked with outlines before, and I absolutely cannot work without one. So kind of, yeah, getting our writing processes in sync. I would say it took some time and it had some hiccups, but we eventually came to a point where, things were working pretty well.
I love that. And I know this is nonfiction, not fiction, but just to give folks a little bit of a window, how long did it take you guys to write this book?
Um, Between the point where it actually like showed up on bookshelves and in stores and stuff, to the point where we kind of first talked to each other, I want to say it was almost 3 years.
Okay,
It
that
was it was a long time, but both of us, have jobs and families and other responsibilities and stuff like that. We we tried to commit kind of a minimum amount of time per week on it each and check in with each other to see how things were going. But it took a long time, and then all the things after, you write the last page,
yeah.
the editing and the more editing and then the rewriting and all the pre-publication stuff. And yeah, it's publishing is not a fast
No,
industry
it is
at
not.
all.
It is so
Yeah.
slow. That's why I think it's so hard sometimes for writers. And I'm thinking from a fiction perspective here, but I think it doesn't really matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. Sometimes it's hard for writers to see trends because they think something is still trending, and then it's like a cut because it takes so long
Yeah.
to publish
Yeah.
a book. Oh my gosh. So let's dive into your book for real. So somewhere in the book, I can't remember. I think it was towards the beginning. You said, and I really loved this because I know I felt a long time feeling like this. You said ADHD writers aren't broken; they just need different tools, and that really spoke to me because I know I went for a very long time feeling broken and watching neurotypical writers write books really fast, and they'd know where everything went, and I'm like, what are you doing that I'm not
Yeah.
doing? Brain, can you just be like them? So, can you explain what you mean by we aren't broken, we just need different tools?
Yeah, and I think it especially relates to how so many people are only finding out in their adulthood that they have ADHD. Like people, from the older millennials or the younger Gen X, that wasn't really kind of at the forefront of anyone's minds back then, unless you were that very specific stereotype of like the fidgety boy who could never sit still.
Mhm.
Girls and women in particularly are severely underdiagnosed. And so when they find this out later in life, they've already had decades of internalizing messages like, I'm lazy, I'm disorganized, I'm, unreliable, I can't do things the same way other people can. And so they think of themselves as like broken people, basically, who
Yeah.
can't function in a world that was designed for and by neurotypical people. I mean, frankly, that's just
Yeah,
how it is.
it is.
Um, and so having that realization, for me at least, it allowed me to give myself some forgiveness. And then once I stopped kind of beating myself up for something, that wasn't my fault, like it's just how my brain is, then you can start to kind of shift perspective into, maybe I can't do it like this other person can, but there are tools and resources that I can develop or learn that can get me to the same place just by taking a different road.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the things that I myself have felt, plus I've worked with many clients who feel this way, that there's this struggle to stay consistent. What would you say to ADHD writers who are having that struggle? Like, what should we be aiming towards? How do we become more consistent with our writing?
I mean, there are lots of different tools, and I guess it depends on if consistency is even something that you value in the first place. You know, do you want to be consistent or do you want to keep persisting and working toward the goal, even if it isn't, a rigid schedule where you write every day or, whatever the case may be, those writing books that say, you sit down at 8 a.m. and you don't get up until you've written your 2,000 words or whatever, like thanks, but no thanks. So, every word written is another word closer to your goal. And I think if you can keep in mind that it's more important just to keep moving forward. And yes, like schedules and consistency do work for a lot of people in terms of motivation, especially if you're motivated by those kind of external factors, like seeing your word count grow in a spreadsheet or something like that. For those people, consistency works really well. It just doesn't work for everyone. And I want to, I guess, let people know that it's okay to let that idea go.
I love that. So instead of being consistent in the way that most writers think, like I need to show up Monday through Friday from this time to this time, or whatever your particular schedule you think is supposed to be, it's more about being persistent so you keep showing up when you can. Am I getting the right idea?
Yeah.
That?
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean you wait until every condition is absolutely perfect so you can sit down and write. But the thing about deciding that you're going to work on consistency, if it's maybe not the right strategy for you, is that if you miss a day or, whatever, then the instinct is to feel hard on yourself. And then you
Yeah.
feel, unhappy about your writing situation. And it just makes it that much harder to get back into your seat again writing. So one of the things we say in the book is that if you are working on, an everyday typewriting schedule and you miss a day, is that you should draw a little bridge from that day to the next day. So it's not, it's not an X, it's not a you didn't do it. It's you've made a new path toward that new day.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I think I'm going to use that. I love that so much because I am one of those people. So, first of all, I do not believe in a rigid schedule. As anyone who's ever worked with me will know, I'm all about like, don't tie your creative life to these external things. We have to find joy in it. That's why we started. That's where we need to get back to. It's not about money or some external goal. Not really. It's about what writing does for us. So, I'm totally about that. And yet, for myself, right? I often without meaning to, I'll feel bad when I've missed a day or when I've, something I meant to do and then I didn't do it. So I love the idea of making a calendar that has like the little bridges across that. That's so fun and just a visual reminder of what we internally need to be telling ourselves. Like we didn't make a mistake. It's not a failure. It's just on to the
Yeah,
next thing, on to the next day.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Just keep showing up.
So you said a little while ago that you and Kirsten were a little bit different with outlining. And I love your idea of outlining. I know it's in the book, it's all about outlining. So can you tell us um, the benefits of working with an outline if you do have ADHD? Or even if you don't,
Oh,
guys out there, if you're neurotypical out there, this benefits you too, trust me.
absolutely. Um, I am, I am like the outlines number one cheerleader. Everyone should have outlines.
Yes, she's
So
right. She's right. Yes.
what an outline does, there's a couple of reasons why people with ADHD can find it difficult to start writing or keep writing. And it's one of them is basically paralysis. So the idea of like writing a book, this massive thing, 90,000 words or whatever, seems so unfathomably large that you can't figure out how to, even start doing that. And the other one for a lot of people is overwhelm. So, disorganization, they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. It all, kind of goes back to that same, it all feels too much. So, an outline breaks down your story into manageable chunks. And when you have an outline, it also kind of gives you some freedom if you are a non-linear writer. So you don't write from page one all the way to the last page. You do kind of sections and then paste it all back together later. It can show you all of those different sections and you can kind of pick and choose what you want to be working on that day. But the other important thing that an outline does, and especially for people who have ADHD and kind of working memory issues, where you can't see the end product, is it actually gives you what you're working towards. So you know what your last scene is. And you know that, you're coming up to it ever closer every day you write. So having that visualization, and even the visualization of like being able to type out the words "the end" can be a huge kind of motivator, because you can see the end goal basically. And so it makes it easier to sit down and start.
I love that. I think that is would be so helpful to so many people. And it helps, of course, it helps with the continuity of the story and making sure if you do write in patches that they all feel like a part of the same thing instead of like they're just dropping in like vignettes from nowhere. I know that is one
Yeah.
benefit for an outline for me, that if I ever do write anything out of order, or the folks I work with, it kind of feels like it's a part of the same world instead of like, oh, this day I'm feeling this way. So the scene feels different, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it can also give you a lot of help before you get to revision, just by being able to see the whole arc of the story and make sure that, each scene actually belongs there and that it fits logically with the rest of the story. I think outlines can save people a lot of time. And like my outlines are massive. Like they can be 10,000 words long. Like they're
Me
they're almost like
too.
a zero
Me too. I
draft.
have like a
Yeah.
45-page outline of the book I'm working on right now,
Yeah.
but it's so helpful to me. Not that things don't sometimes change. Sometimes they do, and there's that creative
Yeah.
freedom. But yeah, it's like this huge container where everything just lives. And I remember why I thought that, and like, oh, that was that character's motivation. Now I remember, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And for, again, with that working memory issue where people can have difficulty, remembering things, like I'm sure we've all had that moment where we have a brilliant idea and, we're like, oh, I'll remember it later. And then whoosh, it's gone.
The biggest
Um,
lie a writer tells themselves, I will remember it later. No, I
yeah.
literally have to started a few years ago because that s- happened to me so many times. I have a text chain with myself when I'm like out running or walking. I text
Yes.
myself.
Yes. I do the same thing.
That's amazing. It's so good because it's always with you, right? It's like
Yeah.
right there. You don't have to think, where did I leave that note? I know where it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's hilarious. I titled it, "You're texting yourself." Um,
That's so good.
yeah.
Okay, so I am not like this. So we ADHD people come in all varieties, guys. So if you don't have ADHD, or even if you do, I mean, we come in all varieties. So it's not like it's kind of like any other. If you know one person with ADHD, you know one person with ADHD. But I know a couple of my clients really struggle with outlines, not because they don't want the structure, but because they actually feel like they don't know what's going to happen until they are writing it. Do you have uh, any advice for folks like that, or is there a trick?
I mean, I tell people that it's okay to leave gaps. So when you're building your outline, put as much of what you know about the story in there as possible. Ideally, you want to know how it opens and how it ends.
Yeah.
I think those two parts are really important. And if you know some things in the middle, that's great. Fill them in.
Mhm.
And I don't always know what's going to happen, at some point in my stories either. And so um, I try and write down what that scene needs to accomplish if I don't know what's actually going to happen. So, if you need to move people from one place to another, for example, then that's what I'll write. I'll write character A and character B need to get to whatever, New York City. Um, but I don't know how they're going to do it. And I don't know who else is going to be there. But just having that kind of bridge allows me to set up the next scene and kind of keep moving forward. And sometimes I literally just write a bunch of stuff happens because I don't even know
Yeah.
what. but I know something goes there. And I do find that as I'm writing and making my way closer and closer toward that point, I start to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then I can go back into the outline and fill in more details because outlines are living documents. They're not something you write once and then, like, pin up onto the wall and frame it behind glass and you can never touch it again. My my end outlines don't look much like my beginning outlines at all because I've edited and changed them so much based just on what I'm learning as I'm writing about the story.
Yeah, I do the same thing. And I think that is something that so many writers, I think, don't fully realize how much of a living document it is. I know that, yeah, when I started on the second draft of my novel, I did this 45-page outline and, I'm about a quarter through it right now. And I'm already going in and making all these changes and leaving notes to myself all over the outline. And that's normal. That's natural. That's good because stories should evolve and change as we're really in it and digging around in the scenes and in the psyche of the characters. And I think that's what makes it fun because I think if you write an outline and you are too afraid to change it, the end product can feel almost stilted, too mechanical. You know what I mean? Because you aren't allowing it to like grow and change into what it could become. So I think that's,
Yeah.
and I loved what you said about it's okay to have gaps. This is something it took me so long. My gosh. So I don't know, for those of you out there listening, I don't know if you know it, but there's often a thing that writers will put in their documents, TK, like to come or something like that, right? That little two letters brought such fear and horror to me. And that's not even a scene level, right? That's not even like big scene level. That's like in a scene. So it took me a
Yeah.
long time to get to the place of like, it's okay to have a gap in your outlines. That's such good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's the other ADHD writers with their outline. So I'm thinking of two clients, one who can't visualize the outline and one who she says that once she writes the outline, she gets bored and she doesn't need to write the story anymore. And this is why she's argued back at me of why she doesn't want to write the outline. She's like, I'll be too bored, Heather. I won't be able to write the book. What advice would you give her?
That is so interesting.
I
Um,
know, right? She's great.
wow. She's just happy with that. She's like, this is the basic idea. I'm good. I don't need to do the book.
Yeah, she's so afraid to outline because anytime she's done that,
Mhm.
she's just gotten bored with it. I don't know. And I think that's maybe where what we were talking about there's flexibility. Like after you write something, that's
Mhm.
not really what's going to happen. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. It's just a few, words or a paragraph or whatever. I mean, there are different reasons why people get bored. Sometimes it's because they don't actually know the story well enough, and so
Mhm.
they need to dive even deeper. Sometimes, and I can see how if you spend, quite a bit of time on your outline, you might kind of lose that kind of beginning huge rush of excitement, brand new story idea. So I find it can be helpful to try and go back to that mindset and think about how you were feeling when the idea first came to your mind. And even if possible, like put yourself back into that same scenario. Were you driving someplace? Were you in the shower? Were you, I don't know what, taking a walk in your neighborhood? And try and kind of recreate it and get that big rush of excitement coming back again. And then hopefully that would create some motivation to actually start diving in because I think a lot of writers, even after they write their outline, they'll think of like, a great line of dialogue or a really amazing way to describe a person or a scene or something like that. And that can also create that kind of excitement. So maybe spending some time visualizing what her opening scene looks like and really like get into her mind. What does she want them to say? What's going to be the big, gotcha gimme that gets the story rolling and start to think about it on a sentence level versus as a concept. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I know
Yeah.
for me, that's why even though um, I write slowly, it's just, it's a thing.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's my ADHD or if it's just a me thing, but I write really slowly. And so I've lived with this story for quite a while and I have my big outline. And I always worried that I would get bored, like, because I know, I'm not going to write a book in 6 months. That is not me. So I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to get bored? But I never do because of just what you said. I'm always like, oh, the scene, whatever I sketch down for the scene, it's like a scaffolding for the scene. I kind of know
Mhm.
the big reason I'm there. I know like the inciting incident of the scene, what's it going to get it going, what needs to happen. But all that other juicy stuff, like the lines of dialogue, like, and then sometimes characters surprise me, right? They're like, oh my gosh, why did you do that? That's
Yeah,
not in the outline. And then of
but
course I have
it
to go in there and
works.
tinker out all
Yeah.
the rest of it and see how it like ripples down, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the best thing about writing, I think, is those moments where, you just get so hyped and you're like, "Oh, I love doing this so much." And it really makes up because we all have hard days too, where it feels like nothing is going well and, our brains feel like sludge or whatever. And so being able hopefully to remember those kind of more exciting, wonderful times helps to balance it out.
Yeah, I think it does. Absolutely. I know without those times, oh my gosh, because people could be doing a lot easier things than writing a book. To me, I think it's like one of the hardest things a person can actually do.
Yes.
Clearly, it's rewarding, or we wouldn't all be doing it, but it's also really, really difficult. There's just so much to juggle all the time.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to writers who have a lot of trouble with distractions? I know I like you. So you say when you have your writing space, it's like at your kitchen table, and that is a chaotic
Mhm.
place. Well, mine, like it looks like I have this really set off office, but I'm actually in the dining room so that we have a kitchen, which is where we actually eat. And then the dining room I made into my office when my children were little because I wanted to be right here if they need me, right? So I'm not like shut away somewhere. But with that
Yeah.
comes all the dogs, all the children, the footpath. I'm in the footpath of everyone. And I know that can be challenging. So what would you do about distractions?
I mean, noise canceling headphones are a big one, honestly. I try and pre-plan for distractions. So, and my kids are older now. My kids are 16 and 18. So they can be a lot more respectful of my space than they necessarily would be when they were younger. But I can say, like, it's fine if you're coming in and out for a snack or whatever, but like, don't talk to me. I'm
Yeah.
working. Um, and plan for other distractions in advance. So, if you know that you're having a parcel delivered that day, maybe like I'll leave a note and say, just don't ring the doorbell, leave it
Oh,
on the step or whatever,
yeah.
um, as much as possible. And picking your environment wisely, I think, if you can also help. So if there is a quieter space, if you can go to the library, for example, or, pay a couple dollars for a coffee and sit in a coffee shop for a couple of hours, use their Wi-Fi. That can be helpful as well. And some days it just doesn't work out and you're up and down and you're, distracted by all the things and all the things in your mind as well. I think internal distractions are sometimes more challenging than external ones when you've got a
Yeah.
zillion different ideas going on. I like to keep, a notepad close to me so that if something that I think about, like, oh, I need to get a prescription refilled, or, oh, we ran out of eggs or something, I can just like write down one word, RX or
Mhm.
eggs, and then let it go so that I can get back to focusing on my writing. Um, so
Yeah,
that's what works for me.
yeah, it's such a wise idea because I know that personally, when something occurs to me, if I feel like I have to keep it in my mind will keep circling it like eggs, 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 eggs. I don't want to forget
Yeah.
the eggs. And so if I write it down, I can let it go, right? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. And then all that mental energy that you would have been expending trying to remember eggs and the fear of forgetting, which
Mhm.
also, can create some anxiety, maybe not for something as minor as groceries, but, something of moderate importance or whatever, then you don't have to worry about, making sure that it stays inside your head because I am the most forgetful person. It is in and out in 5 seconds if I don't make a note of it.
Same here. That's why, again, my office looks so pristine in the background. But if you looked at what I'm looking at, it's sticky notes for
Yeah.
miles
Yeah.
and to-do lists for miles so that I, do all the things I'm supposed to be doing and don't forget anything. It's
Yeah.
it's quite an interesting thing. So what about idea overwhelm? I know this is something that a lot of ADHD writers face, and I know I do. The idea of just how, there's so many things with a story. There are so many possible ways things can go, and then there are so many ideas about thinking about revision. What do you just do about that just constant, how do I even start, or how do I start a scene, or that feeling?
Um, With ideas for revision specifically, I will have usually a separate page at the bottom of my outline that will just be like where I put notes for things that I've realized I need to revise later
Mhm.
so that I'm not going back constantly and trying to fix things instead of moving forward toward
Mhm.
the end. So, and that again lets me keep track of those ideas, not forget about them, but also not let them distract me and take me away from the work of finishing first draft. So that's kind of my strategy for that. And I do the same thing when it comes to new ideas because people with ADHD have, as we know, higher levels of creativity. They are often coming up with new ideas for different stories, and it can be so tempting to put the current book you're working on away, especially if you're halfway through and it's feeling like a slog and you just want to toss the whole thing. Um, so if I have a new idea, I'll do the same thing, but kind of in longer form. So I'll give myself, an hour, 90 minutes or whatever. And again, to write down every single thing I know, I write down where and when and how the idea came to me, which is really important. A lot of times something like a song lyric will just spark something in my head. So, writing that down or a news story, that's happened a few times, and then getting it all out so that I'm not again stressing about forgetting it and kind of losing this amazing new thing that I've come up with. And then once I've got all of those ideas down, I save it, close the document, put it away, go back to my work because I know that it'll keep. And I actually find for me it's easier in the long run if I let it kind of stew in the back of my head for a while and just go back and, keep writing, jotting down these little bits and pieces as they come to me. And then once I'm finished the project that I've committed to finishing, then I can go back and start building it into an outline.
I love that, having like a little idea place where things go. I know for mine, like I said, I always leave like little comment boxes all over my, like if it's an idea for something I need to insert or change in my story, I'll go back and leave myself comments just like an editor would leave me comments. So I do that. And um, I'm really interested about what you said. So when you draft, especially thinking about a novel, do you do the first draft entirely before you do any editing? And if so, do you see that being very beneficial for folks with ADHD?
I really try to because I can get caught up in endlessly rewriting the first chapter or, trying to figure out the exact correct wording for a specific phrase that I might end up deleting by the fourth draft
Yep.
anyway. So, like what you said about going back and putting comments, I actually won't even do that because once I'm back on that page, I will be tempted instead of leaving the comment to just fix the thing.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I have like the separate document to put those ideas so that I'm not tempted to go backward. Because yeah, for me, it's a big temptation to go back and edit because I am a slow, methodical writer. I do try and write the best sentence I can the first time around rather than kind of barfing out the ideas. And I know that method works really well for a lot of people where they just write as quickly and messily as possible so they get it all out. It's not my process. And it's just kind of how my brain thinks about what writing should be. So yeah, I really kind of get in the mindset of I should only be writing forward. If I have revision ideas, write them down, save them for later. That's a second draft problem. It's not a right now problem.
I love that. That would probably definitely help writers get through that first draft in a way that feels like, hey, I can do this. I got through this. It didn't take me 6 years to get through my first draft. Maybe only, I mean, depending if you're me, it's going to take you like a year and a half to get through a first draft. Let's be honest, I'm a slow writer, but you know what I mean? But it does feel like it ends instead of like that constant revision of that first chapter. And you feel like you're just spinning your wheels and you're going nowhere.
Yeah, especially when people are focused on traditional publication. I find I have seen people who, because those first 5 pages or 10 pages are so important, they'll rework them over and over and over again. But like you're only at chapter 13, you've still got 10 chapters to go or whatever. Like you can't be focusing on what an agent might read 2 years from now after you've gone through 4 rounds of revision. Like
Yeah.
that whole scene might be completely different based on what happens as you write ever closer to the end. So it's a trap, I think, for sure.
Yeah, it is a trap because usually that first chapter, that first 10, they're not even going to be the first, they're not real. You know what I mean?
No.
By the time you get to the end, you know what the beginning really needs to be, and then you're
Yeah.
going to be writing an entirely different beginning. At least I have noticed that that tends to be what happens. That first chapter is very, yeah,
Yeah.
its life
And
is
first,
tenuous.
yeah, first drafts are for figuring things out.
Yeah.
They're not for being perfect. Your first draft is not going to be anything like what your final draft is.
So, yeah, let's speak to that a little more. You're talking about perfectionism, right? That idea, this has to be perfect. I have to get this absolutely right because, an agent's going to see these first 10 pages or whatever that story we're telling ourselves that takes our writing. And I've seen this happen so many times, even with myself, takes our writing from being fun to being scary.
Mhm.
We don't sit down and think, ooh, I get to write this. We think, oh my God, what if I get it wrong? I don't want to write today. We don't even maybe think of it as fear, but I think it is.
Mhm. Oh, for sure. And there's so many different reasons why that might be. It might be, fear of failure. It might be fear of success.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, they fear what would happen if all of a sudden they're a bestseller or whatever. Um, so yeah, kind of digging into the reasons why I think is really important. Like, what is motivating that fear? Where is it coming from? Because you can do things to kind of mask fear or cover it up. But if you want to, resolve it, then you have to know where it's coming from in the first place. And so some mental kind of introspection there can help.
Absolutely. I know for me, one of the revelations that I have had over the last year, I'd say, is that, being an editor makes me more of a perfectionist for my own writing and it's getting in my way. And I have to take my edit, like my book coach. I'm like, okay, I know you
Mhm.
know a lot of things, Heather. Put all that to the side and just write, just write. You know what I mean? So we
Yeah.
do have to dig into like that. Why? Why am I sitting down and feeling blocked? Why do I feel that perfectionism creeping in order to
Yeah.
unlock?
Yeah, and allowing yourself to think of a first draft as its purpose is to be imperfect, I
Hmm.
think can help to kind of let that idea go. And it's another thing that we talk about in the book where like I will name my first drafts something. Um, I don't, how do we feel about strong language on this show?
Go ahead. Go for it.
I call them shitty first draft, and that's what I name the document. And
I
and
love
sometimes I'll name it shitty first draft. Do not revise. Just to, it's there.
that.
It's right in front of me every single time I open it. It tells me what I'm supposed to be doing, what I'm not supposed to be doing, the purpose of what this draft is for, and then it just allows me to go like, yes, this can be imperfect. I don't have to think of the exact right word, or I can just put a TK,
Yeah.
I don't know what the dialogue for the scene is at all. Keep going and, fix it in post, as they say in the film world.
I love that. And it is such a good way to think of the early drafts of a novel. Really, their purpose is to exist. I know when I got to the end of my first draft, I realized that almost like 90% of everything I put there was not the real story, but it unlocked the real story.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they come with that phrase that I used to hate and now I love, like kill your darlings. It's not
Mhm.
really saying kill the things you love about your story. It's like have the awareness to understand of what's not serving your story and not be afraid to dig in a new place. Like if you write that draft and you're like, oh, well, now I know what the story really is. I'm not going to try and hold on to 90,000 words that aren't working. I might say, oh, now I know the direction I really need to take.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, an outline can help with that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Outlines will save you guys years and years of work. I
Literally.
literally, even
Yeah.
if your first draft needs to be, even if there are structural things that need to change from your first draft to your second or to your third, it doesn't matter. You've still done so much of the heavy lifting ahead of time. And I think, and you can maybe speak to this, Nicole, it does help us not feel so much fear when we sit down to work on a scene, because it's not like there's every possibility in the world. We kind of know what we're doing that day. It's like, oh, this scene has, yeah, there are possibilities, ways it can change from the outline, but it's not every possibility in the world, like if I was writing pantsing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know how the scene is supposed to end, so you can kind of visualize it in your head a little bit better. And having that
Mhm.
visualization can be a big help for sure. And
Absolutely.
like, I'm also a very slow writer, and I always say that I suffer the writing so that I get to enjoy the editing, because I think I'm an editor at heart. So like, yeah, my first drafts can be challenging and difficult to get through, even with the outline. But I love the revision process. Like I love the editing, because that's where it gets to get good. Like that's where you know what the purpose of the story is and what it's actually supposed to be. And that for me is the fun part. That's what I look forward to.
Oh, I love that so much, because that is so flipped from what so many writers feel like. They love the initial writing part, and then the editing part feels so hard to them. But I think maybe that mindset shift could help people of like, oh, this is where I can make it what it's supposed to be, right? This is where I can make it shine. It's not
Yeah.
something to slog through. It's yeah, and I do find editing fun myself for my own work. So, and well, for my clients as well. So, clearly there's a reason why we are editors. We like the editing, but I think even if you love the writing part very, very much, you can come to love that editing part and saying, "Oh, I can make this beautiful here. I can make it exactly what it's supposed to be."
Yeah. Yeah. That's where you make it so great that people want to read it and think, people love it, and you get those messages from your beta readers or whoever, like this scene is fantastic or whatever. Like that comes from the editing. That doesn't come from your first draft.
Yeah, it's so true. I was just reading um, the story grid framework. Um, and they were talking about the idea of great novels are built in the editing. And it was just such a, it's so true. It's so true. We always, I call our first, second drafts, I call them my little book babies. And my clients are always comparing their little book babies to these New York Times bestselling novels that have been through multiple rounds of editing from top editors at top. I'm like, would you
Yeah.
take your like little toddler and compare them to a Nobel laureate and say, "Well, you're just not measuring up, little
Yeah.
kid. You got to get it together right now." You would
Yeah.
never do that. Don't expect your book baby to be, what you have read either.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we are winding down. I have one question left for you. If you could give every ADHD writer listening one piece of advice for finishing their book and feeling good about the process, what would it be?
Oh,
I know.
that's huge. Be good to yourself. Be nice to yourself. Accept that some days it's not going to go your way and you're still a writer, even when it doesn't. Love yourself and know that you can do it. You are going to do it. It's going to be a different path than other people you may know would do it, but you can. And just give yourself grace and forgiveness for the days where it's not happening, and try and remember the feeling of the good days when everything is coming together. And maybe you hit that hyper focus, so that on the hard days, you know that better days are ahead.
I love that so much. What wonderful advice. I know I've definitely been able to use that a lot. So you have a little freebie for our audience if they want to go join your email list and be a part of your world. What would you like to share with them?
I do, yeah. So I have it's really fancy. It is a spreadsheet, but it's fun. So it is for people who want to build a kind of daily writing habit or a more consistent writing habit. It's a spreadsheet. There's a different sheet for every month. You fill in your word count every day that you write, and it will keep track of it. It's designed so that if you hit your daily word count goal, the cell will change to green. So it's
Woo!
kind of a nice visual motivator there. Like a lot of people are very motivated by streaks. So, like, how many green days can you get in a row? So yeah, I have that. It's available on my website for download. My website is manuscriptalchemy.com, and you can find that in the free resources tab.
And no worries, guys. I will also link that to the show notes. So you can just click right in the show notes and go over there and find that wonderful resource. And also, please definitely go check out Nicole's wonderful book, A Novel Approach Strategies for ADHD Writers. I can personally attest it's marvelous. I read it in like a day and a half, and I had other things I had to be reading. So it kind of got in my way because I was like, this is too good to put down. So it was really good and really helpful. So please go out and buy her book and enjoy. It will help you no matter if you have ADHD or not. It's just a wonderful tool for anyone, but absolutely, if you have ADHD, it will be very, very helpful to you. All right, my friends, that's it for today. I hope this episode has been super helpful to you. Until next time, keep writing, keep dreaming, and remember, the world needs your stories right now. So don't you dare give up on your novel or yourself. Talk to you next time.